Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to be looking at how we can put some conditions on our aggregate functions. So let's just take a look at a query that I just copied from our last video, which basically gives me, for every region ID, it gives me the count of countries in there. And actually let's just name this something. So I'll do a num countries here, and let's try running this now. So what this result says is that for region ID 5 I've got the number of countries is 1, for region ID 4 the number of countries is 2, and so on. So let's say at this point I want to put some condition on this count right here. So what the normal tendency might be to just say where count star is greater than 1. Let's say I want the regions only which have more than one country. So let's just go ahead and try running this. So this gives me an error, and that's because what happens is, let's say I do something like this, select star from countries where region ID is not equals 5, and let's try running this. So what it basically does is, let's just say I just run this part of the query, and let's get rid of this. So what this entire query does is that it goes into the first row and it says, does it match this condition? Is the region ID not equals 5? No, the condition is not satisfied because the region ID is 5. So it says don't add this to the result. Then go to the next row. Don't add, so for this the region ID is not 5, so add this to the result, and so on for every row. So basically this where clause goes row by row. It takes a look at one row at a time, and hence we can't put an aggregate function there because the count of rows is not a single row in our table. So here's one way how we can achieve this thing. So let's take a look at this query again as num countries, and we've already looked at subqueries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enclose this within a parenthesis, and what I'm going to say is, actually let's just take a look at this result once. And what I'm saying now is that from this table itself, this result table itself, so this entire thing is my one table. So let's just rename this table to something like count table, and from this count table select the region ID and the num countries and select it from there, but also add the condition where num countries is greater than 1. So let's try running this. So this correctly gives me the regions that I want, all regions except 5, which has just one country, Australia. So this is one way to do it, but as you can see this query actually went pretty long. So a better way to actually achieve this same thing is using something called the having clause. And what the having clause does is it's basically just like the where clause, where we give some condition, but what's different between the where and having clauses is that the having clause can be used for aggregate functions, and it doesn't do it row by row. So all I have to do is I have to say select region ID and count star as num countries from countries, and then a group by region ID. So the query that I had right here, and then I'm going to just say having count star greater than 1. So it is this query exactly, except for the fact that instead of this where right here I've used a having. And let's just try this out, and as you can see it gave me the exact same result. And let's actually just run some other query so that you're convinced. Now let's run this one. So as you can see it gave me all regions except region 5. So that's basically how we use the having clause. But once again, you can argue that the having clause doesn't really add expressive power, because what I could do here using the having clause was achievable using this as well. So that is true, but then the having clause really makes things simple. So that's about how we can put conditions on our aggregate functions. And when our queries become long even without all of this, when we have to join a couple of tables and all, then we might be interested in shortening out the part where we are putting a condition on our aggregate function. So let's just say I had to join some tables to find whether a region had more than 2 countries, or let's just say I wanted not just the region ID but the name of the region, in which case I'd have to do something like join regions table using the region ID, and then I want to do this group by region ID and all. And here let's say I want the region name as well. I'm not sure if that's the correct attribute name. Yes, it is. So now I've got the region name as well. So let's say I want to do something like this join and maybe some other joins that I might have. In that case, having to do this long query just to put a condition on some aggregate function doesn't make too much sense. So that's why the having clause is really useful. And that's basically it about our discussion on aggregate functions. In the next video, we'll discuss something new, so stay tuned for it.